Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us for today's Lunch and Learn. I'm Lauren Smith with the International Franchise Association, and we have a great 30 minutes lined up for you. Before we begin, two housekeeping notes. We are recording today's webinar and will make it available later this evening on community.franchise.org. If you have any questions for today's speakers, please add them to the chat box here and they will be addressed towards the end. Today's topic is stealing the attention of your most valuable prospects, and it is brought to us by Adworks. Here to provide today's discussion are Keith Strombotne from Adwerx and Chris Pflueger from We Insure. Keith is Director of Business Development at Adworks, and Chris is Chief Development Officer at We Insure. Thank you, Keith and Chris, for joining us today, and thank you, Adworks, for sponsoring. I'll go ahead and turn things over to Keith. Please take it away.
Thanks so much, Lauren. I appreciate you having us. So today I'm going to run through a few brief slides here, primarily focused around one specific solution that we offer, but it's all geared towards stealing the attention of your most valuable prospects, which I hope gets some folks' ears to perk up. And then we're going to turn it over to Chris for a few questions. And hopefully you guys have a few questions in the chat that we can answer as well. And we'll be sure to get you out of here in 30 minutes or so. So real quick, I want to talk about who we are as a company at Adworks, where we've been, where we're going. A very specific solution we call customer relationship advertising, and then the why and the ROI behind it. So a little bit of background, Adworks has been automating digital advertising for about 8 years now. And in the early phases, we were very focused in specific verticals, real estate, mortgage, wealth management. And we basically would have a self-service or a retail solution that we would hope that their sales team and producers would come through and easily run digital advertising campaigns in minutes. And it worked very well. We've got 400,000 customers on the retail side of the house, but really what it allowed us to do was to build out our enterprise solution, which we've been focused on for the last 4 years or so. And what that looks like is these companies, instead of just hoping that their teams would come through and actually utilize our software, they would automate campaigns for every single producer. And dependent on vertical, it would look different ways. But the traction we saw was very quick and explosive. We've got about 180 employees now here in Durham, North Carolina, or spread out all over the country thanks to the pandemic, but we're continuing to grow. What we've learned over the past few years is that there's a very specific component to our software that was more vertically agnostic. It would work as long as you had a sales team. And we call it customer relationship advertising. We're the only ones to do this in the space. And the goal is to humanize your digital marketing. Customer relationship advertising is pretty simple. It's built around a very simple concept in that people buy from people. And I'd hope you'd all agree with that. If you're in kind of a sales role or if you've managed sales teams, it's a very simple truth. And it's something we very much believe in. As companies, we invest heavily in our tech stacks, in our CRMs, marketing automation platforms, our advertising, and our goal is to personalize that outreach as much as we can. That's what the market demands these days, whether you're a client or a prospect or part of a referral network. They almost expect personalized outreach, and it can be challenging to do. If you think about something like email, you're going to get an email from Keith at Adworks, not Adworks, right? My information, my headshot, it's much more personalized. We've been doing that for years. It's very challenging to do with advertising. So what we do is we humanize that process. Instead of showing, faceless company and company-centric creative, we actually put the salespeople on the assets themselves. Now, that alone might not sound kind of groundbreaking, but actually the process behind what we do is. So what is customer relationship advertising? It's fairly simple. We integrate with your CRM and we pull down the data we need in order to create an audience for targeting. And the data we need is very simple. It's just an email address. If we have an email address, we can put an ad in front of that very specific person. So once we integrate with your CRM and we create these audiences, from there, we automatically build the right assets with your sales team on them to target the right people. So, I'm working with Chris, we have a conversation. I don't talk to him for a few days. When I'm browsing online, I'm not just seeing We Insure, I'm seeing Chris with We Insure, which is wildly beneficial. And we'll get into some of those metrics. Once we have that data, then what we do is we target and distribute those ads wherever those people go online. So of course we'll deliver on social, so Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, but we also deliver these ads on the premium web. So Wall Street Journal, ESPN, all your major news sites. Wherever these folks go, we can put an ad in front of them. For better or worse, your email address is kind of like your digital fingerprint. So we know kind of where you are and where you go, we can put an ad in front of those. And the traction that we've seen has been rapid. We've been doing this for a long time in a lot of different verticals, but with this very specific solution, I would say it's fairly new in the way that we've done it. We just recently raised nearly $15 million to really accelerate the growth, which I hope shows that investors in the market kind of believe in what we're doing at scale. Another key component to this is it's simple, right? The lift is not on your side. There's no development needed. There's no huge project in order to actually turn this on. All of onboarding and the lift comes from Adworks. We integrate with a ton of different CRMs. If you have something more homegrown, we can actually just utilize Google Sheets and automate from there. But the solution and integration might sound like a huge burden, but really it's creating audiences and approving creative, and then you're kind of off and running. When it comes to the targeting and audience creation, it's completely up to you. Obviously, in kind of the franchise space, you know who your targets are. We know who that audience is. It's not lead generation. You already have this data and these leads housed somewhere. Let's leverage that data for top of mind marketing. So you can basically create an audience however you'd like. We filter based on objects in your CRM in order to create the audiences. Very, very simple. Everything is up to date. So when your CRM is updated with new leads, new prospects, your advertising reflects that, and it's dynamic. So your marketing team doesn't have to go in and change the audiences or change the creative. Our software actually handles all of that for you. So it's not a huge marketing lift either. Everything's dynamically up to date. And for folks in a leadership position or a VP of sales or a VP of marketing, you actually have access and insights into all the campaigns that we run. And while your sales team may have accounts, we can be honest, they're probably not going to get into the software and change anything or do anything, and we don't want them to. They need to be focused on what they do best, and that's going after new business and generating revenue. I've been in sales for a long time, and every time we implement something new, you kind of tense up. Man, I have to learn something new. This just runs. So our goal is to make your sales teams as efficient as possible without changing their behavior. So let's talk a little bit about why this is important and the ROI behind it. Three things happen when you implement customer relationship advertising, two of which we have some real data behind and research studies, and one of which is fairly anecdotal, but we're hearing really great things from our partners. Anecdotally, for folks with very long sales cycles, call it 3 months, 6 months, a year plus, in the franchise space, I think it probably differs based on what your focus is, but if you have a long sales cycle, it tends to shorten it. The rationale there is, if I'm on the sales side, there's only so many times I can pick up the phone, send another cold email, try to go to a trade show or meet people in person. But if we can, it really does a great job of keeping you top of mind. And most of us know that most of sales is about timing. So the other two here are very much data backed. The first, we took 86,000 leads of our own and put them through this type of targeting. And we saw nearly a 30% lift in meetings booked. So if the goal is activity, more meetings, more demos, more opportunities, implementing this type of targeting, there's a huge lift. The final one, we took 40,000 of our customers who are running this type of targeting, and they saw a 15% lift in production year over year. So again, not lead gen, but if the goal is sales enablement, if the goal is top of mind marketing, this type of solution is a home run, and it's all automated. Without this, your marketing team has to do too much. If you just had 10 sales reps and you asked the marketing team to change audiences and creative just twice in a month, that's like 60 marketing tasks. It becomes unscalable very, very quickly. And we have partners that range, but really doesn't matter what your size is. If you're trying to do this in a dynamic fashion, the lift on the marketing team can just be too great. This also has a really great impact on other marketing initiatives that undoubtedly you're already running, whether it's automated email, if you're doing some geo-targeting, if you're still doing print collateral or print mailing. Facebook and LinkedIn did a research study about pairing email campaigns with digital campaigns and saw a 77% lift in reach and a 22% lift in conversion. So if the goal is to make a positive brand connection, implementing this type of targeting has a huge lift across the board. So I'm going to pause there real quick. I know I kind of spouted off, but I want to make sure that we kind of make this a little bit more conversational. And Chris Pflueger is someone that we've worked with for quite some time, and it's probably better to hear from a partner. So Chris, I'm going to turn it over to you, and maybe you can shed a little light on how you've worked with Adworks in the past and toss me any questions you may have.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. Keith is 100% correct here. It's when you're marketing, especially for sales, it's never the one thing that was, the little silver bullet, right? It's always a combination of things. And so what we found, and again, I've had this role as Chief Development Officer here at We Insure, which is a property and casualty, insurance franchisor. And we've grown, nationwide. And as we've done this, one of the things I did prior to, as I did the exact same role for Remax, right? So I had a national sales teams. I did it for a mortgage franchise as well. And one of the things we always were jealous of from a sales perspective is we didn't have the Adwerx product we can use just for the salespeople, right? It was something we could use, but we couldn't use it just for the salespeople. And it wasn't built for that. As a franchisor, it's tremendous. Initially was built as a platform where we could control all of the content, make it available to the franchisees. They could get everything for pennies on the dollar, and we actually control the content. I mean, it's a win-win, right? From a legal perspective, from a franchisor perspective, and from the ability that every time we had one impression that we paid for, someone else paying for 7 more, what else could you ask for from a brand, right? So it was fantastic. Now with the CRA product, we have the ability to use this on the sales side, which actually made me very excited, right? So as we all know, when we have a sales team in place, we can't be sure of their daily activities. We can have a fairly good idea, but we're not sure that from A to Z, every single person is as effective as they possibly could be day to day, especially during COVID, even today, right? So one of the things that we really liked about Adworks is we can use that in conjunction with all of our other marketing efforts, our calling efforts, our emailing efforts, our video efforts, whatever it might be. We could use that in conjunction, and we know that the prospects are getting a visual engagement consistently, right? No matter where they go. And so that point alone was worth it for us. The metrics, the back end, the tracking, the control of what was being sent out, all great from a legal perspective, but from my perspective, just the consistency of message and the integration with our existing efforts has yielded quite a bit of results for us. So I'm very pleased, overall, and I wouldn't go forward without it. It's an integral part of our sales process. And so just to give you an example from switching over to We Insure, we've grown at a 50% rate year over year for the last 2 years. And, we went from 1 state to 27 states in the last 25 months. So we're excited about the growth and we're looking forward to more of it. And again, with partners like Keith and Adworks, it's been very beneficial. So
thanks, Chris. Appreciate that. Any questions that you think might help the group that I could answer?
Absolutely. I jotted a few down here from my perspective. And so, someone like me, and again, I'm sure everyone on the call is thinking the same thing, someone like me who's responsible for recruiting the new franchisees and actually getting through that sales process, how should we think about the CRA product from Adworks?
Sure. I think I would look at it not as purely a silver bullet. Nothing is, right? It's an accelerant for your sales efforts. It's sales enablement through marketing technology. That's really a hands-off approach. Once we kind of understand the structure and the scope of the campaigns and what we would deliver, you shouldn't really be thinking about it very often. Everything kind of just runs. So it won't replace the things most salespeople are great at, picking up the phone, maybe hitting the road, but it really softens the ground, is what we like to say. When we build a face-forward approach to advertising, people feel like they know Chris before they might even talk to him on the phone for the first time, if they've seen him, on their favorite websites or on social. So it really makes you kind of a consistent figure or presence, which is really, really helpful. And again, the key is it's hands off. We're all busy. We're all managing teams, responsible for revenue. If we can implement something with a flip of a switch and it increase productivity and increase the KPIs that we need, to be productive, I mean, it's a home run.
And that's a great point, Keith. Regardless, I mean, obviously we think we have a fantastic product out there, and we think we have the best story, the most turnkey solution in the industry, right? But if no one knows about it, it makes it very difficult for me to put units out in the marketplace, right? So this really does, and you're absolutely correct. When we roll into a new market, we already have a target audience in mind, and we'll strategically start using, Adworks up front before we start making calls or start reaching out to folks and putting on, different either seminars or just direct calling, whatever it might be. This gives us an opportunity to really get out there and have our name out there in advance of the call. So it's really more of a warm call than it is a cold call in that particular case. So,
yeah, I think you did touch on something that I forgot to mention, which is, I think we all know this kind of inherently, but it's a hectic environment out there on the internet, right? You're being bombarded with emails and ads and all these things. The goal is to steal mind share, right? If you can be the first person or the first company that they're thinking of, that's a win. And how do you do that? Well, without automation, it's nearly impossible. So we want to make sure that we're stealing mind share as we actually implement these campaigns.
Fantastic. Okay, the second one's kind of a two-part question. So obviously these days, post, pre-COVID and now, during COVID and post-COVID, a lot of people have adopted a very distributed sales teams, right? So is this attractive for distributed sales teams as you have them out there? Because we're not all based in a call center somewhere, right? It's all over the country. People are working from all over, as you can imagine. And then secondarily, is there a certain size? Like, obviously I know our size, sales team works very well, but I've had sales teams that are twice this size in the past and thought it worked very well. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, sure. Let me take the first part. So a distributed sales team, centralized sales team, it doesn't matter. So as long as your sales team utilizes, a CRM or some sort of database, you have emails for targeting. We don't care where anyone is located. Because we have email addresses for targeting, they could be anywhere throughout the country, and they typically are. Many of our partners have distributed sales teams. In terms of size, size will depend on your price. Your price will depend on your size. So we have partners that range from 2 salespeople to 20,000 plus salespeople. You don't have to necessarily run customer relationship advertising or CRA for all of them. You can kind of choose a subset. We can test things out. We can always pour gas on the fire later, but the technology is the same, whether you have 2 or 20,000. It's purely the scope and the number of impressions that we deliver. So I would say distributed, it works wonderful. And size is purely dependent on how we structure the platform.
Excellent. Well, the last question I have, and I know there's some that are popping up in the chat as well,
Sure.
is, and you mentioned it earlier on in your discussion, implementing new technology scares everybody, right? Especially on the sales team.
Yeah.
I'm sure I'm not alone when people say, wow, another thing to worry about, as you work into. And again, this is very turnkey, from our perspective. So it presents unique challenges. What's different or easier about, Adworks and how CRA actually is implemented and works?
Yeah, I work for a technology and a software company, and we run into the same struggles ourselves. We buy something, then you have to train the team. Sometimes it's not even implemented because it's such a challenge or a lift for our development team, which is just, sunk cost or wasted opportunity. I think where this is very different is kind of twofold. One of which is there is no lift outside of approving ad creative for your side, right? It's purely on the Adworks shoulders, which is really, really beneficial. But then actually the sales team who benefits from these campaigns, they don't have to learn or do anything, all right? The campaigns just run. Now, can they get into their accounts and look into metrics? And of course, a few of the more curious ones certainly will, but it's not something in which you have to kind of hope that they adopt it and learn it and implement it for it to actually work. It will work and work well because it's automated and they don't have to do anything. So I think that worry should kind of go out the window because everything's real turnkey.
Fantastic. Well, I'll read some on the side if you're okay here. So Eleanor Smith, I think we answered this one for her. How does it function with one salesperson versus having an entire sales team? It functions the same, I think, across the board. It's just easy to manage if you're a sales manager of some sort for a large group as well. So,
yeah, spot on. I think when it comes down to it, the thought process isn't necessarily, hey, do I have 2? Do I have 10? It doesn't really matter. It's more audience. How many contacts are those salespeople responsible for? Is it 100 contacts that they're going after? Is it 1,000? That's where we really start to structure, okay, how many impressions do we need per campaign to actually hit these folks appropriately? And that's maybe one thing we should talk about is frequency. There's something called the forgetting curve. And it's getting shorter and shorter these days as our attention span kind of is that of goldfish. People forget about you, and it's not, malicious or, through any fault of their own, but again, they're just being bombarded. We all are. How do you combat that forgetting curve? And the goal is to stay in front of these folks with frequency and repetition, that you're kind of like the flow from Progressive, right? There's a reason that they run commercials and the frequency that they do, because you don't forget about them. So when you have these audiences that your sales team is responsible for, we want to make sure that they're seeing that salesperson in your company branding every day, every other day, not just once a month. It's just not sufficient. So we want to make sure it's not necessarily the size of the sales team, it's the scope in which that we create these campaigns for them. I hope that answers the question.
It does. Actually, you touched a little bit on Ken's question too, which is here. So some best practices a franchisor should implement to brand their franchise sales professionals in today's competitive digital landscape. So a little of this, you've touched on the fact, just now, but you also, the fact that you're actually branding that particular franchise salesperson in their particular market, whether it's geographic or it's a targeted market list, they're branded with their face, name, and your company as well.
Spot on. So we call it face forward advertising. There is obviously a benefit in running, company centric creative, whether it's geo targeted to our list of prospects. But we know when you put a face on an ad, engagement goes up. There's a connection there, and because people buy from people, we see that they almost appreciate being targeted with these relevant ads rather than non-relevant ads. So best practices would be face forward, and then also with frequency, it can't be once or twice a month. It needs to be, once a day, every other day, maybe, 3 times a week. There needs to be enough consistency and repetition with that delivery that you're staying top of mind.
Well, I'm sure no one's, surprised by hearing that, right? Consistency is really the king. If you see things happen consistently, whether it's in real estate, insurance, literally any brand that we can name out there, the consistency is what keeps not only top of mind, but will win the game, right?
Yep.
If the guy who sends out 2 pieces of marketing and says it doesn't work, it's going to be a long day for that person. They're not really going to be a salesperson long term. So,
so Coca-Cola wants every person on the planet to see their branding, their logo 3 times a day. Right now, they have the marketing budget to do so. But I think what's kind of unique here is that concept can be brought down market to folks with far, less of a marketing budget if we're targeting a very specific audience. Your audience isn't the entire globe. It's this group of 500 key prospects that we've identified. We could hit those folks 3 times a day, no problem. And the spend wouldn't be astronomical, but it achieves the same ends.
Phenomenal.
Cool. Any other questions in the chat? I'm not sure if I saw any. Nope, do not see any. Well, Chris, I certainly appreciate it, man. Love working with you for years and years here, and glad that we're, coming through for you guys. Lauren, I don't know if you have any other final thoughts or parting questions, but really appreciate you guys having me on.
Thank you so much, Keith and Chris. This was excellent content and excellent feedback from all of you. We really appreciate it. I just want to remind everyone this webinar was recorded, and along with the presentation deck will appear on our website early this evening. You'll be able to find that at community.franchise.org. Thank you very much again to Keith and Chris and the Adworks team. And again, thank you to everyone for tuning in. Have a great rest of your day and stay safe and healthy. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks, you guys.